Okay, but our plan for today is to give you a bit of an update on some of the things that we're working on. So there's some new toolkits in the pipeline and some new things that we're thinking about with TED. In the second half of today's session, we are going to be having a bit of a discussion on future developments in TED and wanting to get your ideas on what would perhaps help you, but most of all, what might help our team leaders as well. As I said, Sam's going to drop in to talk a little bit around what we're doing with staff survey at Lancs Teaching and how that aligns with our TED work and what's our plan this year. I think we shared similarly this time last year, so it's useful to sort of get a picture of how that's evolved for us at Lancs Teaching over the last couple of years. We'll have a bit of a chat around organisational priorities, so we'll offer that open to discussion. So it'd be good to hear about your priorities, perhaps how you're using staff survey at the moment, what things are on your mind at the moment, and that'll really help us think about when we go ahead into this year, what might we want to focus on with maybe our TED toolkits or our teamwork that we're doing in different settings. In the second half of today's session, I'll share a little bit about our enhanced team leader program that I've developed. We're about to launch at Lancs Teaching, so I'll share that with you. But it'd be really great to hear your ideas around how you're approaching training. And I think we were just having a discussion as some of you are coming in around, what different things you can do and how you can mix it up for different team leaders and different teams. So we'll share that with you as we go today. Hi Sam, welcome. I'll bring you in a sec. And then, as I've said, to sort of cap us off today, we'll have a look at some future TED updates, and we'll have a talk ourselves around what we'd like to see and sort of build a wish list. We've done things like this before, but we're going to be super focused today on things that really can help teams and team leaders specifically, and we'll go into that. And finally, we'll cap off by signposting you to our other events. We've lots of lunch and learns plans. Coffee catch-ups are always successful, and I love the discussions that go in there. And we'll look ahead to our next deep dive as well in a few months' time. So yeah, hi Sam, welcome. I did explain that you're sort of multitasking today, aren't you? You're working with the team at the same time as coming on to our event. Are you well?
Yes, I'm well. I'm going to do my best is my motto today. We just had an away day that needed someone last minute to help out. So and then all those speakers kind of came at different times. So it's one of those. We've all been there, haven't we, in OD? Thank you for your patience and apologies for being late.
That's no need to apologise at all, and it's lovely to have you here, and good on you for being able to multitask in that way and support our teams at Lancs Teaching. That's what it's all about. So just to recap, as we always do at our deep dive events, we like to signpost you right back to what our collaborative decided when we first set out. So I think way back when we first set up, there were probably about 7 or 8 organisations, and we co-created our collaborative. So we talked around what we want this space to be, how we can make it useful for you, our TED clients, also for us in terms of developing TED and making it into what it wants to be. But our intentions in these sessions are to be present and curious. Please participate and share. It's as much about you sharing your ideas as us sharing our ideas as well. Please listen actively and respect. Lots of different organisations on the call today, so it's always really good to see how different people are approaching different things, and try to be creative and solution focused. So we're going to have a few sort of breakout discussions today. So there are no silly questions. There's lots of great ideas, I'm sure, out there, and you've really inspired us over the last few years that we've been using TED externally for us at Lancs Teaching. You've inspired some of the developments we've already put into it, and we want to keep that going, and that's what this space is all about. So just a couple of updates to signpost you to. So these are just things in the pipeline at the minute. So some of our toolkit resources, Lindsay and myself have been working on a team rituals activity, and this is really sort of born out of the idea that we the sort of small things that we do in teams define who we are, and how successfully we work. And the idea behind team rituals is trying to find ways that teams can embed rituals which really do underpin who they want to be. So like a lot of our TED toolkits, they're there to provide, I guess, accessible ways that different teams are able to embed positive rituals and positive behaviours. I think we often get asked a lot for our civility resources and things within TED. So the hope is that our team rituals toolkit, which you'll see in the next month or so, will be a useful addition to help teams on that sort of topic. And Sam, did you want to say a few words about our psychological safety tools, which were...
Yes, I will. And just to pick up on what you just mentioned around team rituals, we often find when we're talking in the recognition space, people have them, or they did have them, or they've lost them. So I think sometimes it's not necessarily about creating something new, it's about making more of what you've currently got. So there's one ward that I know who, for someone's birthday, they always decorate their desk, and and it's things like that, those small interactions that actually make a difference to how staff feel on a day-to-day basis. But also where teams have something that they like to use, like how can you make more of that? How can you build on that? In terms of psychological safety, we work with a university, we might be working with the second one actually soon, and they sent us basically 50 resources that are all linked to psychological safety, with permission for us to reuse these within TED as well. So that's what we're going to be doing. Some of them are similar to ones that we've already got, which is fine. And it just gives us more choice, I suppose, when we're working with a team. So for example, the in and out circle of safety, we used this with our board actually just a couple of weeks ago, Louisa, our director. And basically that leads to kind of a team canvas, but it's kind of the start, so how to build that safety before you then move into agreeing your team charter or your team canvas. Same with social contracts. So they're just different versions. We've done retros before on TED, but there's another version of that. And then there's 6 different ways to use it as well, which I think just gives teams choice. We've got so much diversity in our teams. What might work for us in our OD team might not work for the trust. It's a bit of a checklist, so that can be useful in terms of a teach. And if you've already got psychological safety in some of your leadership modules, it could be that you could embed that or maybe roll that out further. So there's loads in there. We're going to work our way through, but hopefully that'll be useful. If there is anything in particular that you think actually you're interested in psychological safety, I'll just pause there for a second, and just see if anyone has a view or anything that you've noticed recently. Come on in, Claire.
Hi, Sam. Yeah, I'm really enthused to hear about this because it's a massive issue in our trust, and I think it's good to have some tools that actually might help facilitate readiness for change, because in some teams, there just isn't the level of psychological safety for TED to embed in the first place. So actually, having tools that could help teams prepare, toward, with readiness being the goal, is really, really good. And as an alternative to kind of, just offering reflective spaces, which, from the point of view of a very small centralized kind of OD team is quite a resource heavy approach to take, because obviously, it's unlikely that if a team is so psychologically unsafe that one reflective practice session is going to be enough. It's often a long to medium term commitment. So to actually have resources that maybe team leaders on the ground can take some ownership for, to start preparing teams towards that readiness for change, I think would be brilliant.
That's really interesting. I'm just writing into the chat readiness for change. What the university did, so they've gone through a big restructure, and then they created like a 90-day plan for teams, and so it's all in this one document, and then hyperlink the different resources. So week 1 you might do this, or month 1 you might focus on this, sort of getting the foundations right. Month 2 might be this. So it really, I think they've done the change, so it's a bit trying to retrofit it, I suppose, as opposed to getting them ready for change. But I think I'll attach that anyway. We might not make that into a TED. We might be able to make that into a TED resource, but it's very context specific. So maybe we could just circulate that, and you can use that as might be useful.
Fabulous, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And I'm just noticed a couple in the chat. Yeah, issues. I mean, I'm I'm working with a couple of teams at the moment, and trust is massive. You know, they just don't know each other well enough, and it's all interlinked, isn't it?
Yes,
new
absolutely.
team that have been pulled together brilliant, thank you so much. And someone else has also added a newsletter, so fantastic to see people sharing ideas as well. Thank you, Claire. And there's some more people writing, but I'll pause there, and we can move to the next slide now, Lee.
Okay.
Oh, we're into this bit then.
I think that's a little bit Sam.
That's great. I'll stay with me then. What I will say is, once they're up and running, maybe we can come back to say, well, what could this look like as a package, or maybe as a campaign, or how could this be sort of it's that idea, isn't it, of scale and spread. We can't, like you said, Claire, do it all. So what could we do that might support team leaders to access these resources? So the next section was all around staff survey, and we kind of do this once a yearly now, don't we? Because it is a big part of what we do. And TED for us is really embedded with our work around staff survey. So it may be that you're as embedded with staff survey and TED, or it might just give some ideas. So I think I wanted to start just by sort of explaining where we are as a trust. I thought that would be useful. So for the last 10 months, we have as a trust been going through a lot of change and a lot of challenge in terms of the finances. So I'm sure many of us are in the similar situation, but just after Christmas, we've been escalated to special measures. I think it's level 4 or something like that. So very much every penny is being counted and checked, just due to the deficit that we're in. So we've had a huge amount of controls being put in place. So a lot of our team leaders are feeling a lack of autonomy, a lack of they're supposed to be responsible and have that ownership, but actually how can they when all the decision making is being taken away from them? So there's that. And we've also had a significant change where in our system we've moved to it's called One LSC. So a lot of our services have been transferred and they're all working centrally across the system, things like IT, finance, all of these. I don't know, I would be curious as to if any other trusts or systems are beginning to work that way or starting to talk about it. But that's where we are. So we've had quite a turbulent 10 months, I would say, probably best part of a year. And so we weren't too surprised to see that there has been a dip in our staff survey results this year. And maybe after sort of 4 years of year-on-year improvements, maybe it was always going to happen. You can't, I suppose, sustain those improvements. So that's where we are. And looking at sort of where we've dipped in terms of national averages, it is around staff engagement, morale, always learning, safe and healthy, and the We Have a Voice, but it's particular aspects of the We Have a Voice because we are still above national average in the We Are a Team. So we do see that positivity coming through. I think the engagement and the morale is mainly around patient care and obviously not feeling like they would recommend us as a place of care as opposed to the other aspects of the engagement questions. So that's where we are. So I was looking at our plan that we circulated last year with you guys, and actually we're still going to be doing all these things. I don't think the results make us have to throw everything out because actually I think we're doing all the right things. So we're still doing the data, we're still circulating toolkits, we're really trying to improve support for divisional leadership teams and trying to get their people plans all aligned. We've done a big focus on understanding the data and we're going to continue doing that. So for example, with sexual safety, we really dug into those 2 questions and we did a lot of outreach work where we went to teams who were showing sort of maybe in the data that there might be an area that we needed to draw awareness to that. So we are definitely still using that. We created a dashboard, so we're going to continue doing that, and we've definitely done a lot more to signpost managers earlier and things like that. And we're still identifying sort of maybe around 50 teams that we then want to work with. So they've either dipped, so they might be still a high performer, but we've seen a significant dip, or perhaps they're a low performing team overall, and we'll still be celebrating high performance. So that's our overall aim with staff survey. Feel free to come in and ask any questions as we go through these. Next slide, please. And this might be familiar if you've been on some of these sessions before, but we don't just try and do something at a corporate level and hope it seeps down. So we really take this, everybody has a part to play. So we do work in the corporate level, we do work in the divisional level space using our OD colleagues as kind of the at divisional workforce teams. And then we have a big emphasis on the team leader, because they are the ones that have the most influence. We know that. So we're really focused on them. And then, of course, everybody in the team has a part to play as well. So that's over a sort of high level approach. Next slide, please. And then, so out of that, we have these 5 key work streams. So our corporate level action plan, I'm going to share some of that with you in case it's helpful. Our divisional level work. And this year we've talked about team level priorities. So we're kind of doing some push objectives, and I'll show you them in a moment. And then again, we've got this enhanced team support, which I think we're going to be working with in what Lee will be described later as this new program of activity. And then because everyone is just so challenged, and I think it just feels very hard at the moment, we're going through a make one change approach. Let's just do one thing. And we do say, you know, you can do more, then great, but let's all just do one thing. And that's our focus this year. Next slide, please. I will share these resources the same as last year, really, but just in case we've got new clients and you just want a copy of, oh, what does your dashboard look like, or oh, what does your guide for managers look like, we'll just send them out, and if you like them, great, use them, tweak them, change them, make them your own. And we would always welcome if anybody wants to come maybe to the next quarterly deep dive and maybe share some of your work as well, things that you're doing. I'll just put that invitation out there. Next slide, please. So at a trust level, these are our 10 corporate action plans. So we're continuing to focus on sexual safety, and I think we've done some really good work in that space. Like I said, reaching out to teams directly, running training sessions, really looking now about what next. And at the PICA conference that I went to a few weeks ago, I really wanted to start thinking of, a lot of the emphasis has been put on the victim to speak up, the victim to do this, the victim to do that, and not enough necessarily on, well, what about the person who's the perpetrator, or whatever the right word is. So we're going to be looking at patients this year as well, and a big focus on how we educate them. And I think at PICA they said nationally it's something like 32,000 people have said they've had at least one incident in the last 12 months across the UK, or maybe that was just the PICA amount, but that's incredible amount. So we really want to start using some of those big figures. And then we're talking about physical violence, which is linked into that as well, and freedom to speak up. So we've had some change, so we want to kind of re-embed some learning around that. Flexible working took a little dip this year, so we're going to do a bit of a campaign and link that into the wellbeing offer. Recognition wise, we're introducing a colleague lottery, and the 50% of that will go to the staff as prizes, and 50% will go into a recognition fund, where we might do some things throughout the year to kind of surprise, and because you don't have much of a budget, do you? So we're going to use that to provide as a budget to then do some recognition work. We've got an EDI trust actions. I mean, I'm really interested if anybody has anything to share around advocacy and patient care, because those are the two that are dragging us down. People not feeling like the organisation is prioritising patient care in their decision making, and people not feeling like they would recommend to family and friends. So if anyone's had any success in those areas, please tell me the secret, because I would love to know. And then the next thing is we're enhancing our leadership offer. So we've brought in some brand new programs that will be starting this year. And then as I said, we've got these push objectives for teams, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. We've talked about the outreach to at least around 50 teams who've had lower scoring areas, and then response rates is going to be a massive focus for us this year, because it dipped a lot last year. So that's our priorities. Next slide, please. Yeah, happy to share, definitely. Oh, one more. So this is the kind of thing that we've been talking to. We've got a leadership forum, we've got a managers update once a month, and we have just been trying to acknowledge the difficulty, because I think there's no silver bullet here. There's not one thing that they can do that's going to fix this, and it feels really hard. So I think we've just had to own the results, to say this is reflective of where we are, and maybe we're not sure exactly what to do next. And then the next slide, please. We're trying to have a really clear narrative, and we're just going to repeat this narrative over and over and over again around what can you control. It's really easy to think, oh, everything's out of our control, we've got no money, rah, rah, rah. But actually, you know what? We can always influence how we behave. We can always influence how we manage our team. And that if we're all doing that, then that will have that ripple effect. And And again, focusing on our people managers as a key influence. There's nothing much we can do at a corporate level that will affect how Julie Smith feels on Ward 2 about her shift that day, but actually her team and her manager, that's where we can focus our actions. So we're talking about starting with your own team, improving the way you collaborate, taking small and meaningful actions that will just help people foster that environment where everyone feels valued. And actually, when I look at our data, particularly in TED and linked to retention, the individual evaluating individual theme is the one that we think, maybe not correlation, but a very strong relationship between retention is coming through at divisional level linked to that theme. And then, of course, the idea is that if we can focus on that, it will ripple out across the organisation. Next slide, please. And then this is our kind of mantra. I'm saying this everywhere. Every session that I've got, I'm talking about this. So we will improve the colleague experience one conversation at a time. And we're just going to go back to basics, which, you know, in honesty, these are the jobs that we should be doing. But let's not talk about that right now. So ensuring every colleague has a quality appraisal. Can we do that? Yes, we can. Strengthening team working by running a TED team conversation. Can we do that? Yes, we can. Having those one-to-one check-ins, that's a big push for us this year. Upholding standards of civility through compassionate performance conversation, and we've just got a new training package around compassionate conversations. And then finally, we're going to keep engagement strong through recognition and stay conversations. And that is what we're asking of managers. That is your action plan this year. And then alongside that, if we move to the next slide, we're asking them to design one team action with the team. That's it. So they'll have this print off for their areas, and what we're asking them to do is rank yourself regularly. You know, are we red at the moment with appraisals? Do we need to move to, how can we get to green? You know, are we doing our one-to-one, so they can keep track of that regularly? And then alongside there, they've got one team action that they should co-create with the team, and making sure that they agree when the action's been done and how that made them feel. So that's what we're focusing on this year. I don't know if that is relevant or helpful to people, but we just always like to share where we're up to and then ask for anybody else who'd like to share. Did I have another slide, Lee? Oh, there we go. So over to the round table now.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And yeah, as Sam says, that's just an insight into what we're doing, what our key priorities are at Lancs Teaching. But we wanted to sort of throw that question out, because understanding these sorts of priorities for yourselves as our client trust with TED and understanding what's coming through in staff survey really can help us think around how can we use TED to support some of these priorities, and how might new toolkits or new system features in the future help our work in these types of areas. So first question is, what are your priorities for 2025? Maybe they're similar to what we have at LTH, or are there any different things, other things you're working on at the moment or plan to work on later on this year? So I'll just give you a moment, but feel free to come in or contribute in the chat. Alison, would you like to go in?
Priorities, my God. Just looking at our staff survey, the biggest one, which has been for years and years, and if anybody's got a magic wand, it'd be wonderful, appraisals and quality appraisals. Everybody's having one, but everybody's saying that they're not quality. With the amount of changes that we've made, we've simplified it as per messenger. We've tried to make it easier with the resources that we've got. We haven't got the money to have a big fancy online PDR or appraisal sort of platform. So we're trying to do it the best that we possibly can, but it's just not getting out there. We do PDR training, we talk about compassionate leadership, we talk about compassionate conversations. And one of the things that, again, it's not happening, it's not just with appraisals, but with other things as well, it's not getting embedded back in the workplace. We can do all the leadership training that you want, you can do all sorts of stuff, but actually, is that being embedded back in the workplace? And it isn't. And it's you know, I've only read the results this morning and I just want to go home. It's just so difficult at the moment. It really is, and I'm sorry for being a big You know, it's all horrible. It's not, but it's just so difficult to embed these things.
I hear you. Before we move to Claire and Lucy, I thought, can we pause on appraisal for a second then? Does anybody have any ideas or things that you just want to sort of in reply to Alison? Coming in, Jeanette.
I hope you can hear me because there's some loud machinery outside the window. So if you can't, I was starting to type it into chat. One of the things, because not surprisingly, our organisation's the same when it comes to appraisals, and it has been for quite a number of years. And a few years ago, I did a piece of work through listening to action and we connected with around about 250 staff across the organisation. And unresoundingly, what people were saying was, it's not about the quality of the conversation on my annual appraisal. It's what happens on the other 364 days of the year. Where are my check-ins? What are those opportunities? So I'm not saying the same things and then nothing's happening, or the same things are on my personal development plan and they're still there the 12 months afterwards. So it's the other 364 days which will make the biggest difference to whether or not people then connect to that appraisal has actually made a difference. And that was unresounding from all the people who we actually spoke to. I don't know if that's helpful.
That's a really good point. It's just made me think about a diagram we've just done in the appraisal document, which will also link to one-to-ones, and just sort of how, I mean, ideally we know one-to-ones would be better if it was monthly or bi-weekly, weekly, but I think realistically on wards, we're saying it needs to happen at least quarterly, because that feels realistic. Minimum, if you can do more, great. But I might try and find that image and pop it in the chat there. Alison, I don't know if that was helpful from Jeanette there. Before I go to Claire, I'm not forgotten about you, Claire, and Lucy. Christine, are you coming in on the appraisal point there?
Hi, yes, sorry, my MS Team has been playing up. Yes, so I was going to mention that at our trust, we have just rewrote how appraisal run as a whole. So previously, we would have appraisal window once a year. And again, having those regular appraisal and one-to-ones is a struggle for many of the teams of time and space and all the rest of it. But we know how important it is with having those meaningful appraisal rather than just a once a year conversation that actually leads to nowhere. So the new structure that we've got is that they have appraisal is not the area that I lead. I lead on TED. So I'm just speaking out as far as I know, it is now has been split into 4 sessions. So it is around making sure that everyone get that one-to-one conversation every quarter, but each of the quarter they will split into a specific focus. So I believe the first quarter is around setting objective, and then you have a quarter around PDP, and then a quarter around something else. I don't remember exactly what it is, but then at the last quarter it is around the wrapping up the conversation, how we're doing, and reflecting it back on the last year performance overall. But I think it is a starting point for us to have a change, because what we would like to see is that we will train our manager of how to run those appraisal conversation or those regular every quarter conversation, and then be unlocked on the system for future to always go back and review and reflect. But it is still new. It's only literally starting off. It will be 1st of April. So I will let you all know how it gets on in about a year time. What is the sort of compliance rate or response rate? How is our manager feeling so far? Because some manager feels like instead of 1 conversation, we don't even have time for. Normally, you're asking for 4. But actually what we're trying to put in that change their mindset is that those one-to-one has to be regular. That's how we build trust and relationship with all our colleagues, that those regular check-in, as well as having those meaningful conversations. Hopefully with your PDP and things regularly being reviewed, etc., then it will get somewhere instead of just a normal appraisal conversation. It will help you to grow and develop as we go along. Thank you.
No, that's really, really good. I like the idea that the breaking up the focuses as well. That might be helpful for managers who perhaps do struggle to get a long conversation. I've just popped into the chat just to continue this last focus on appraisal. I think there's something around language as well, and I'm a big believer in comms and how we talk about things. So I'm trying to push for this my appraisal language, because actually, and I think it was Paul in our team, Lee, who did some appraisal training. He said everyone is responsible for one appraisal a year, your own. So if you've not had it, then go and talk to your manager. You don't have to. I think we get a lot of, well, my manager's not set my appraisal up, but actually the only thing that you're responsible for is your own. And if everybody took that approach, it wouldn't be about the manager necessarily having to be just the only person responsible. So we've definitely started to add that language in, sort of my appraisal, my one-to-ones, to give that ownership, I hope. The only other thing I was thinking of, Alison, is just that idea of reach out activities. So sort of the worst, perhaps the areas of the trust that maybe have the worst, if you maybe tackle 10 and just let them know, like, we've seen in the data it's low and etc. These are things it'd be interesting to see how much impact, just by helping 10 teams perhaps over the course of a year, could that then overall give you an improvement and at an org level as well. Sorry for talking a lot. Over to you, Claire. You had a point around your priorities.
Yeah, it's probably quite relatable to most, if not all of you, in terms of it feels like a bit of a ball of wool at the moment in terms of where to start. But I think the most immediate priority is going to be around meaningful conversations and engagement around staff survey, because I think fundamentally what's the most shocking feature, I think, of the results this year is not the level of kind of negative scores, it's the lack of engagement. Like our response rates are drastically lower, and a lot of this comes as no surprise. So kind of contextually, we've got like vacancy control at the moment. We're just coming out of NOF4 in terms of finances. We've undergone a lot of organizational restructures and changes where a lot of the feedback has been there hasn't been meaningful engagement. People have perceived a real disconnect between the words and actions of exec and senior leadership colleagues. So I think the biggest challenge for us, given that I think the dynamics, because everything feels under such tight control, it feels very one directional at the moment to staff. They feel completely lacking in autonomy. I think trust and psychological safety have been damaged by our ongoing situation. So yeah, I think it's about how do we really get to the root of what matters to people without getting ourselves tied in knots and overwhelmed. So I think that was why my ears really pricked when you were talking about kind of simplifying things, enabling teams to become quite boundaried in their conversations about, well, what can we control, and actually relying, rather than relying on some silver bullet, which quite frankly doesn't exist, actually investing in that ripple effect at a team level, and where teams are starting to thrive, really shine a light on that to kind of change up the organizational narrative, which is very kind of doom and gloom at the moment and all about learning from what's gone wrong and what's missing, as opposed to actually what's going right and where is the good practice happening and how can we build on that.
Yeah, excellent points, Claire. Sorry, Sam, did you want to go in there?
No, I just couldn't get the mic off quick enough.
Yeah, but I think lots of us can relate to that, and I think it's definitely something we've seen at Lancs Teaching, that Sam talked around, that perception of care being our number one priority is sometimes in conflict with the idea that we're trying to cut costs and we can't spend and invest the way in a perfect world we'd like to. And I think thinking back through a TED lens, I think I think you've sort of positioned it well there as how team conversations and a little bit around reframing as well. I think when finances are tight, I think it's really easy for teams to feel a bit of a victim mentality that oh, it's happening to us, it's, you know, we don't have any choice, there's nothing inside our control. And it can feel really, really difficult. And I think Sam mentioned the examples as team leaders as well, who are having to go through more layers of control around budgets and things like that. So it's stripping back their autonomy. But where something like TED can really help is it helps to reframe that question, as you said, to think around actually there's lots here that we can celebrate, that there's lots of resources we do have, and how do we make the most of the resources that we do have?
Absolutely.
And no more so important than staffing as a resource, how do we make sure that the staff resource that we do have, even if we feel it's not enough, the important thing should be how do we value the staff that we do have? How do we make sure that people in our team, we support their health and well-being, we make sure that, you know, they're not likely to leave the team, you know, they want to stay for the team and work together. And that's where something like TED can really help.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, thanks for sharing, Claire. I think that's a really good example. Just come back to our list. Lucy, would you like to go in next?
Yes. Oh, I've seen my big ghost. Yeah, thank you very much. Just to kind of talk to you about some of our priorities, and I'm probably coming more from an OD lens here, but we're really valuing the importance of kind of going back to basics, really, to support our managers so that they've got that confidence and that they feel powered to go and kind of follow a lot of our policies. So driven by the financial need, really, and obviously we need to look at the way we're practicing. We put together a suite of training under the title of, you know, It All Adds Up, and as part of that we're focusing, like yourselves, on sexual safety, the behavioural framework, and we're also looking at our leadership packages to see, you know, what that currently looks like, and, you know, how can we tailor that to make it even better. We've touched upon already, haven't we, that, you know, I think there's going to be lots of change ahead of us, so it's about how we can prepare our staff and our managers for that. So we're looking to put you know, a readiness for change training package together, again to promote that it's communication, isn't it? If you can maintain that communication throughout, hopefully you're going to build that psychological safety and know how to navigate, you know, what a challenging time ahead. But we're also realizing, you know, the importance on focusing on staff well-being and resilience as well, to try and build that. Another of our priorities is to focus on anti-racism. So as a trust, we're currently working towards achieving bronze status in terms of the North West BAME Academy anti-racism framework. So as part of that, you know, it's looking at how we can reduce health inequalities, how we can promote equal access to career opportunities, for example, and support our ethnic minority staff. And again, focusing on how can we reduce things like sickness, but with a slant on, you know, better supporting our staff who have disabilities, long-term conditions, neurodiversity, for example. So again, creating that caring, compassionate culture. So there's lots going on, and obviously TED, of course. So lots of priorities there, but again, it's all about supporting our staff and our managers.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I would just, I suppose, signpost people too is do have a look through the TED Toolkit, because there's so many things on there. And I always get a bit surprised when I come across something. I was like, oh, I was just about to make that. Thank the Lord I had a quick check. So we do have a bit of a catalogue, don't we, that maybe we can also send around. So if, save you going, I think we've got a list, a Word document list, so we can always share that. and just think about how those could support you. You know, if you're doing a campaign just through your newsletter, and you're doing a call out to managers or something, you don't have to be TED trained to necessarily use some of those TED resources. So there's one or two on there around one-to-ones, and around sort of top tips for team meetings. You can attach those into your comms. So if you were doing a bit of we sometimes pick a topic from staff survey every other week to say, one of the things that was, dipped this year was this. Don't forget, it's important to do this, this, and this. Here's a TED resource that might support that. So that can be just another way. And again, you're not going to change everything, but it's another nudge, I think. I'll pause there, Lee, and hand back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that wonderful point. Yeah, and thanks for sharing, Lucy. And I think it sounds very similar to what we're doing in terms of that. What's that one thing that everybody can do, and the idea that if everybody takes that personal responsibility for something that is inside their control, whether it be a change in behaviour or a different way of doing things or changing the way they communicate, then that can have a really big impact, and it can really positively impact the way our teams work with each other, the way they work across teams. And if everybody does it, then it impacts at an organisation level as well. So yeah, really love that approach to your priorities. And I just wanted to come back to what you mentioned about psychological safety again. Obviously we touched on that a little bit earlier. Our new toolkits will hopefully help support that, but I really like that idea of perhaps using some of those sorts of toolkits, even maybe before you've done a TED, use it to maybe position that conversation before you get into TED and think, right, how are we going to use TED to promote psychological safety in our team, and how can we use this as a mechanism which will help us feel safe, but also how can, as a team, we embrace the feedback that we get through TED and use it in the right way, in a constructive way that really helps us work together. And I think, yeah, those sorts of priorities are really powerful if teams can get them right. So yeah, thank you for sharing some great examples there. Fab. So yeah, thanks everyone for sharing some great ideas there, and some good ideas coming through the chat. I think a lot of you can relate to those topics. I think of all those topics, different organisations obviously, but I think they're all things that resonate with us all in working across the NHS. Very similar challenges, very similar themes that are cropping up, it sounds like, across different organisations. But some really great ideas there, and it's great to see the sort of innovations that you're applying in your own organisations to work on this with your teams. Fab. Okay, so now I did have a break plan there, but I think we've got some momentum here, so I'm going to keep going on the next topic, and then we'll have a break after that. So Sam mentioned earlier that part of our approach from staff survey leads into some of our new work that we're doing to support team leaders with TED. So over the last few months, I've been working to create a different approach to TED team leader training. And it's not to say that this entirely replaces the way that we've done it in the past. It's not to say that that it wasn't working the way we were doing it in the past. But I think something we've definitely found at Lancs Teaching is that different approaches will reach different teams and different team leaders, and there are definitely different preferences out there in our organisations. And as we know, different teams are at different stages in their development journey, and in terms of the type of support that they would need. So what we're about to launch on the back of our staff survey results, and as one way that we can support our teams to work on some of the themes that are important to them, is through our new enhanced team leader program. So to give you a bit of context, a lot of you'll all have done accreditation training where I describe the approach that we've had at Lancs teaching hospitals. But at present, what we've been doing with team leader training for TED is offering a 90-minute online workshop that's accompanied by the 2 e-learning modules that we've created. And this approach is designed to make TED accessible to all, and it's a training program to equip leaders with an awareness of team engagement and some practical tips so that they can start to work with their team. The whole sort of ethos around TED, or one of the main parts of the ethos around TED, is that it is accessible, and that teams and team leaders in different settings of different shapes and sizes, covering different professional disciplines, can engage with TED in different ways. So over the past 8 years, we've tweaked this a little bit, but this training approach has helped us grow the number of teams participating in TED to over 150 teams every single year are now using TED across Lancs Teaching. So we're now at a stage where we want to, I guess, get to the next level in terms of teams that are engaging with it, and think around how we can provide enhanced support to teams who maybe feel they're not ready to start with TED, or they're not ready to take that leap, or maybe team leaders who feel they need that additional level of support or would benefit from it. So what I've been working on is the new enhanced program, which offers a more structured program for leaders who might be maybe brand new to team leadership, or maybe leading a team with some very, I guess, very challenging circumstances, or very significant support needs. So our intention is to provide further depth on team engagement fundamentals, whilst also supporting leaders to embed best practice habits and provide structure to help them stay on track throughout their TED cycle and into future TED cycles that they do with their team. I share this slide quite often, and I just want to give a shout out to South East Coast Ambulance Service. I'm not sure if anyone on the call from there, but Shauna, our colleague from our TED Collaborative, created this at South East Coast Ambulance Service, which I think really sort of summarises how we sort of engage with different levels of teams and the different types of support we might need. But this triage model illustrates how we often sort of engage with different teams. So a red team might be a team that we are giving that hands-on support. I'm sure a lot of you do this across your organisations. Those teams that need it most, they might be the ones who are scoring lowest in your staff survey. Sam talked about our sort of 50 teams that we might target our support around, whilst at the other end of the scale, we've got green teams who we encourage to run with TED. We'll give them that fast track approach to team leader training so that they can very quickly get up to speed, they can grasp the fundamentals of it and start to have a go and start that continuous improvement approach, learn as they go along and work with it with their team. So we are, however, we know, as we've just talked about with staff survey, we're in an climate where we've perhaps got an increasing number of teams who might fall into that red category. Having grown TED initially through our early adopters, what we want to do now is create something which offers something of additional support without being too hands-on. So we're sort of tackling some of that middle ground. So where our previous model might have covered the green and some of the amber teams, the new enhanced model aims to lend itself towards those more challenged teams, but also perhaps some of those teams who might have been on the cusp of doing TED, but might just have some barriers to getting involved in it the first time. It might also be for teams who've maybe tried TED in the past and didn't get the traction that they'd hoped for, or struggled somewhere along the way. So we developed this enhanced program that can be targeted to those sorts of team leaders and teams. Our aims for the programme are, as always with TED, it's to develop confidence and capability from team conversations. That's no different to what our training models have always been. But the idea with this programme specifically is to give team leaders more enhanced support at different stages throughout their TED cycle. At an organisation level, our hope is that this will grow our engagement activity, and hopefully as we get more and more teams use this, then that will start to see that impact in our staff survey results, as well as our TED numbers and team engagement work. In terms of who it's for, I've already mentioned that it could be something which is really useful for a new team leader, someone who is thinking about team dynamics for the first time maybe, or maybe new into a team and unsure where is the right place to start. It might be leaders who are seeking development, so we want to offer this as a development opportunity for leaders who want to enhance the way that they work on engagement with their team. But more specifically, it's for teams with significant challenges or those who've stalled when trying to use TED in the past. And also it might be for teams who we've seen decline in the past. So if there are teams who maybe TED is indicating there's a decline, or where staff surveys indicating they're in decline, then this can hopefully help them, help give them a way back to where they want to be. In terms of the format, so we've got different stages here. First off, in terms of application, so whereas our fast track model we offer as an open to all approach to TED, the enhanced team leader program will be something where team leaders apply. The purpose for that is so that we can ensure that we're giving it to the teams who do need it the most. I think sometimes when you launch something like this, those sort of super engaged team leaders will want to get on board and get on it, but that's what the fast track approach is for. So our intention is that we'll be nominating teams through either our OD leads who work with our divisions across our organisations. It might be senior managers within divisions who see the teams who perhaps need this type of support. Our talent management programs might identify new team leaders who might be looking to build their engagement skill set. And it might be our data recommendations. So as we've said, through staff survey, but also through things like retention data, maybe things like freedom to speak up numbers as well, that might be telling us there are certain teams that need this type of enhanced support. The formal steps then, once someone's on the programme, they'll do an initial intro workshop, which will be a 3-hour in-person classroom session. And that will cover similar things to our fast track training, such as the engagement benefits of working with your team, a bit of the background to why we're doing TED, why we buy into this as an organisation, what the outcomes can be. We'll also walk team leaders through setting up their first TED, and our intention is that they will leave that session being ready to send out their first survey if they've not sent it out already themselves. We'll show them how to navigate the website and set up the survey initially, but then they'll come back in roughly about a month's time for a review workshop. And the intention is that between that first and second workshop, teams will have sent out their TED survey. They'll have most of, if not all of their results back, and they'll be ready to go into that facilitated session with their team. So the review workshop will be focused specifically on facilitation skills. We'll be reviewing team results. We'll be looking at different scenarios, and we'll be focusing on toolkits which could help them specifically in their first TED cycle maybe. The intention then is that team leaders will be fully equipped to be able to start to talk with the team, to share their results out and work towards that action plan. But to support them in that journey, every team leader on this programme will be allocated a TED coach, which will be one of our OD team, who will help them identify milestones. They'll help signpost them to relevant toolkits, and we'll suggest toolkits which might be particularly suited to teams maybe in the first TED cycle or starting out on the journey with TED. Over the next 6 months, they'll have up to 3 meetings with their coach who will check that they are on target. They will check in with them on their action plans, listen to any challenges and support them and signpost them to anything which can help them on that TED journey. So the TED coach role is really to help to reassure our team leaders, keep that momentum they get from initially on TED, where we know sometimes teams do drop off, but also build them up to that second TED cycle, and when they'll be reviewing the progress that they've made and checking back in on team engagement. The final element of the programme will involve a follow-up workshop roughly 8 months after their first one. And the intention there will be that team leaders will come to that, they will share their progress with the cohort, they will reflect on their own learning and development as a team leader, and they will be primed to set up and engage with their second TED survey. So the intention here is that it will help us learn about the journeys that teams go through. It will help them think of TED as more than just a one-off and something that they will continue to do, and it will set them up into that TED cycle with the momentum and confidence they need to keep going with TED. Some of the perks that we've got on here. We want to offer our team leaders some recognition for coming on the programme. We're going to be offering certificates of achievement to everyone who completes the programme, and we're going to be giving them some tools to help them with their team. So Lindsay's been creating a great team planning board, which we're going to offer to all members of our cohorts on this programme, which will help them plan their journey as they go with TED. And the idea is that teams might want to put this up in their staff areas, use it as something they reflect back on regularly, and use it as a guide to sort of summarise what they've discussed as part of TED, but also think around what those next steps are. It will also help our team leaders when they come up to that final workshop to be able to review the progress that they've made. We're going to be giving team leaders a facilitator pack, so some pens, post-its, and we're currently developing a coaching questions toolkit of the good practice coaching questions that you can ask on different topics that could come up through TED. And that's something we'll be sharing with you through the TED toolkits. We're also going to be recommending some starter toolkits as well. So for teams that are doing TED for the first time, we'll cherry pick some of our resources that can be really geared up to help teams on the first part of their journey. And I think what we've discussed today, things like setting the tone for that psychological safety practice, things like thinking about your team purpose as that North Star for what you're aiming for and for guiding that work. It'll be toolkits around those sorts of topics which help them. And something we're also currently producing, we've got some TED drinks mugs, some coffee mugs to give that extra sweetener to team members who support us on our first cohort with this and support us with the case studies that we'll develop as part of this programme.
I think it's the pens they'll love. I was
Absolutely.
talking to someone the other day and then, can I take a pen?
Yeah. Absolutely, we know NHS staff love freebies and things like that, and absolutely for us it helps us get our TED brand out there. It helps other teams perhaps notice and start to think around, oh, maybe that's something for us. But we also wanted to have it as a nice little incentive for those who are willing to take the leap and come on our first cohorts. In terms of the benefits that we see out of this, it intends to benefit team leaders through that enhanced support for those who need it. By offering more structure throughout that first cycle that a team goes through, we want to increase their chances of repeating TED in the future. So we'll be selecting specific TED toolkits that might be beneficial to particularly that first cycle, and we'll also provide team leaders with that recognition through certification and the other goodies that they might receive. It's something that we hope team leaders will add to the CPD portfolio. It might add to the CV to show that they are someone who understands team engagement and can work with their team, so that they've got some sort of evidence to be able to show the great work that they've been doing. From a team's perspective, The programme provides greater structure through the planning board, through coach-supported action plans that the team will be working on, and the facilitation packs as well to help those facilitated discussions go as well as possible. Team leader coaching will ensure that teams get regular reviews through their team leader, and the programme also will be encouraging teams to do TED at least twice in a calendar year, so it will help them get that momentum early on the journey with TED. And finally, the programme will underpin our organisational commitment to TED. So by offering an alternative entry point for teams who might be more challenged, we'll add to our existing engagement activity, which drives colleague satisfaction across the trust. So by working more closely with a cohort of teams, we hope to generate more case study evidence that will help us showcase how TED can work in different settings. And we hope to highlight how TED can be used to overcome significant challenges that teams face. So from our perspective, it will help us to grow that narrative that we have behind TED and be able to encourage other teams to take that leap and get on board with their first TED. A little bit in terms of the programme, I'm not going into too much depth on this, but we're currently taking applications for our first cohort at Lancs Teaching, and we're planning to begin that in April. We'll keep you all updated on the progress of those cohorts, and we'll be following their journey over the next couple of years, really, because our support won't stop once they finish on the programme. What we're hoping is those teams will see successes and repeat TEDs year on year, so we'll be able to follow that trajectory that these sorts of teams go on. Our intention is to start a second cohort towards the end of 2025, which will also provide us insights into how teams complete TEDs at different times of year, and what that might mean in terms of where they complete it in the staff survey cycle. So it all helps us with our understanding of TED, having a closer understanding of teams as well, and it helps us grow how we support teams going forward. And then to summarise, really, what we're now offering at Lancs Teaching is 2 ways to get on board with TED. So the enhanced programme doesn't replace the previous one. We've just sort of repositioned them as 2 alternative points of entry for different types of team leaders and different team situations. So the original fast track programme provides team leaders with the introduction to the TED approach. Leaders receive that online training and e-learning so that they can get started with TED and access the suite of over 100 resources as soon as possible, and very quickly get up to speed and start using it. The enhanced team leader program is that 8-month qualification where leaders in their teams will be supported by a TED coach, and it's ideal for new team leaders or those with complex team dynamics. So together with their peers, team leaders will learn about best practice approaches, practical team activities, and developing a continuous improvement approach to engage their team. So that's an insight into our next plans, but I wanted to throw the question out to you. What are your thoughts? I've seen lots of things coming in the chat. I'm not sure if Sam could summarise that. There's an awful lot in there.
Oh, well, I think mostly mine. Okay, so yeah, Marie shared, didn't you? I don't know whether you can come in, Marie, or whether you're in a room where you can't talk. Marie shared that yeah, she would love more details because she thinks that she might want to deliver this as well. Just because I think, and I've written quite a bit of a long comment. I didn't realise how long it was before I pressed send. But I think the creation of this programme is that where we are right now with our team leaders, so that's why this has been created. But again, we don't want OD responsible for running all the TEDs. We can't. So I think a bit more structure, giving them that time to space to think, because we know that that's what team leaders say they don't always have. But also when they meet other team leaders, I think that really gives them a boost too. And then I've just also put, like, at the end there, yes, it's a bit of resource and time from us, but ideally it's 30 teams running 2 TEDs, 60 TEDs as the outcome is the goal. So definitely think it's useful there. And then Rachel said she's enjoyed the session but must leave. Hope you have a good day, Rachel. So those were all, and I just answered for you, Lee, that you would be sharing the resources for this programme?
Absolutely, yeah. So as we sort of go through this first cohort, I'll share as part of these events that we go, I'll share updates with you, but I'll also share things like the slide decks that I create, the session plans, and any resources that we do create. As I say, some of the first ones will be our coaching questions, and I think that'll be useful not just to team leaders on this program, they'll be useful for any team using TED really. But we can share things like our planning boards as well as templates that you can use and adapt to suit your own training programs as well. But thank you for all your bits in there. So yeah, any other thoughts, or does anyone do anything different, anything you're trying which might be useful to share with others in your team leader programming? Jeanette, would you like to come in?
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing is we do a one-day face-to-face, and we encourage 2 or 3 people from each team to come, so then it's not just all on the shoulders of one person in relation to that, trying to keep that momentum going when we're in the same climate as yourselves. And we spend we spend the morning and part of the early part of the afternoon on just exploring team engagement development, what's their current context, so spend quite a lot. We use the baseline document which we get them to fill in before the training, and that encourages some of the conversations. And then the afternoon, while they're in that headspace and there's 2 or 3 of them, we get them to start their action planning, so they're in the moment. We've created the time away from the role, so they do some practical takeaways for the afternoon. We also encourage the department leadership team to be a subgroup to try it out first rather than go out to the whole team. That gives them the opportunity to start small. It's probably a little bit more manageable because they're not trying to capture everybody across all those different shifts. Gives them the opportunity as well to experience it and role model it. So then when they're looking at trying to engage with their team members and getting people on board, then actually they can talk about it in a very different way because they've experienced it, they've taken part in it, they've been able to see what some of the differences that it's actually made for them. It also helps with their skills development. And at the same time as we're obviously doing the coaching, from either coaching them through when people are feeling okay but they just want a little bit of support, as well as then maybe some of the co-delivery on some of the not the facilitation but just being there as a bit of a support. And there's the odd one that we do bespoke support for, but we're trying to encourage that as a way of getting people started rather than it feeling too big and overwhelmed, particularly with the current context. I don't know if that helps to anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Jeanette. I think some really great ideas there. I like the idea of encouraging others, not necessarily the team leader, to engage with TED, because you're right, having that support from others in the team can be a really big factor in helping that momentum. And it makes me think of you, Lindsay. I know Lindsay from our team, Lindsay's previous team did TED, really big team, but they really benefited from having someone like Lindsay who supported her team leaders to keep that TED momentum. I'm not sure if you want to say a few words, Lindsay, from your own experience. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No problem. Sorry,
Right.
it was my mouse had gone to sleep, so I was just trying to find the unmute button there. Yeah, so in my previous department, I class it as a very fortunate position, really, because the management team put a lot of trust in me to work with them and also my colleagues. So I was kind of the middle ground and the communicator to obviously feedback information to the management team, and I mean like higher management as well, not just assistant manager kind of level. So I worked with a variety of different leadership positions to help support them, and then obviously try and bring the team together and understand that what we're doing is a team perspective. It's not just what works for us at our level. We have to work with the managers and vice versa, and team leaders and things like that. So yeah, the managers basically let me run with it. I had one-to-ones with my colleagues, try to get information from them, find out where they felt we needed to, what areas of development and other areas as well that were of concern, but some of them weren't TED related, so I kind of had to justify the reasoning behind what we were doing and what TED is quite a lot for them to understand the road that we were going down. And then obviously I then presented all this back to the management team in like a PowerPoint format really, and had a meeting with the higher management team, and then sat down and worked through these points with them, to which they then delivered change within the department. So it did work very well.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, and I think that's a great example that really highlights what Jeanette was saying, the value of getting others, not just the team leader, involved, because it can help you keep that momentum, but also having advocates within the team for TED can often, sometimes team members might be more likely to speak to a colleague amongst them rather than the team leader themselves. So having more advocates of it helps keep that long-term momentum. And I also like, Jeanette, what you were saying around encouraging larger departments to get the sort of leadership team to do a TED first. I know we've used an approach like that with several teams at Lancs Teaching, and I think it's just another way that you can help leaders get through that first TED, because I really do think if you can get teams through that first TED on the cycle in whatever format you do, the learning they get from that first experience, and then you can get them into the second one, then is when they really start to learn and think, right, how can we make this our own, do it in the way that really suits us. So I think that's a great example that you've shared there of how you can do that. Thanks, Jeanette. Christine, would you like to come in?
Thank you. I was just going to mention that the 8-month development program is brilliant. I think the enhanced training is brilliant, because I think you probably know, Lee, that we work with TED coaches because at the moment OD team is very restricted with resources. So a lot of our work is relying on our TED coaches, which is we're quite fortunate. We have people from the leadership and OD team, from the education team, from Freedom to Speak Up Wellbeing, and the best practice team, like some of our HRBP and HR advisors also get on board so that they are aware of TED program, and hopefully they will sort of spread the word out of and encourage and promote the program. So I think that's brilliant. And the best part is that I saw you breaking it for, so what is the role for the TED coach? What is the expectation? Right, there's 3 meetings in between survey to survey, so it's a lot more structure. Whereas the moment I will encourage them to get in touch every quarter. Yes, I do encourage that, but there isn't any structured checklists or anything, and things will get dropped off, and that's why our focus at the moment is getting our team to resurvey, because that's a lot of our team has already been done off the first survey. It's time for a resurvey. And our current approach is that we deliver the monthly TED training virtually only, and because our in-person training hasn't had much of a take up for some reason, so we just focus our resources on virtual training. It's easier for all the leaders to access sort of over the wherever that we're based, and it works for us. And the in-person delivery that I do is embedded as part of the leadership program, our Peaks leadership development program. So that is in person, and that's when we managed to go through the training with about 30 to 40 people per session. We know there is managers or colleagues that from the training might be from the same department, so it's not necessarily that every leaders that we train will run a TED survey. But what we are trying to do is bring the awareness of TED. You don't have to do a survey to use our tools, whether you're trained or not. Is getting the conversation in and get the engagement in. But yeah, I was just going to say that's brilliant. And Lindsay, the planning board that it was shown, would definitely is something that I will borrowed and use moving forward. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Christine. Yeah, and glad you like it. And yeah, absolutely, we'll share anything that we can from that program. And I think, yeah, coming back to what you're saying, what we're hoping is that that structure will help those team leaders stay on track with it. And I guess what we're doing, I suppose, the end point of this program is to really launch them into that second TED with momentum, with confidence, with that learning that they've had and that support that they've had throughout their first TED cycle, also together with the idea that it's going to be a bit of a cohorted model, so that they realize they're not in it on their own. There's other teams going through this, and there's opportunities to learn from each other in the group as well. So that really is our hope for this program. And as always, we'll share how we get on with that and any resources that can help. And just in terms of that other approach, I know this approach won't be for every organization, for every team, and this is a bit more intensive than you know in some areas you might like to. And I think the reason we've decided to offer this alongside our original model is what we wouldn't want to do is have this as a bit of a barrier to teams doing TED, because we know some teams don't need this level of support, and we wouldn't want to slow them down in that momentum. So the fast track still definitely has that place, or what's now called fast track for us. So I think there are advantages to that online model, that quick access, that being able to get involved with the tools and be able to set up and run your first TED really quickly. There's definitely an advantage to that. But for us at Lancs Teaching, I think we've got to a place where we've engaged with all those types of teams already. Those are the ones who are on TED, they're using it year on year. So we're now at a stage where we want to try and tackle some of the other side of that scale, those teams who haven't yet been confident enough to take that first leap, and to help support them through that leap of faith, I guess, that they are doing in jumping into TED. But thank you all for sharing. Glad you're sort of keen to see what we do with that and keen for us to share, so we absolutely will do. So we're about 25 past now. We've got time for a little break, so if we have about 10 minutes, if that's okay with everyone, I'll leave the room open. But if we come back about 25 to, and then after the break, we're going to be talking about future system developments in TED and how we can enhance the system even more in 2025. So we'll let you get a quick drink, stretch your legs, and we'll see you back at 25 to. See you soon. So I mentioned at the start that now, so at the beginning of 2025, I suppose we're in March now, so time gets away on us, but we're now at a place we launched earlier on in the year, or back end of 2024, our enhanced reporting dashboards. We've had a lot of really great feedback from those of you that have been using those already, that are really helping you out in your roles. And we're now at a stage to think about our next developments in TED. So thinking about the system, the survey, maybe the features in the website, and how can that help the TED process that we have for team leaders. So on this slide, I've sort of summarised that TED ethos that I spoke about before. It's nothing that we've sort of formalised before, but when thinking about it, for me, the TED ethos is all around building capability and capacity. And I think that applies to, first and foremost, our teams and team leaders, because we want to support their capability, help them be more capable at dealing with engagement topics, but also support their capacity by harnessing the power of team working so that it helps them in their roles that they do. I also think this factor applies to us as practitioners as well, because TED is a great way that we can develop our own capability, because it gives us new ways of working with teams, new ways of offering support. We've got an off-the-shelf library of toolkits that can help our capacity in the way that we work. And the intention with TED has always been that it will help us reach a wider audience, because in any of our NHS trusts, we don't have the capacity to work with every single team. But with something like TED, hopefully we can maximise the reach of the work that we do and get some of the teams self-sufficient in this type of engagement work. Second point on there is about empowering, being empowering for team leaders, and definitely that's always at the forefront of TED. And even when I was designing something like the Enhanced Team Leader Programme, I was really conscious that one of the sort of key features or the key selling points with TED is that we don't want it to be something that's done to teams, and that's definitely not our intention with that program. We want to still provide that support, and the sort of framework is all around helping team leaders to do this for themselves, but providing them the structure to build that confidence and capability, so that they can run with this themselves. And the final point there is about promoting a culture of continuous improvement. So it's about recognizing that there are no magic wands. You won't solve all your problems in a day, but what you can do is understand them more and point yourselves in the right direction so that you keep improving year on year, TED cycle after TED cycle. So I want you to keep those sort of themes in mind as we have a discussion around the key points of or some future developments that we could place into TED. So I'm going to bring up a whiteboard in a moment, but what I want you to think around is what developments could help our team leaders. So what improvements to the system would help them maybe stay on track with TED, or maybe use TED for the first time, access the toolkits that they might want maybe. What would help them keep momentum, and are there any ways that we can make the process easier? So I'm going to bring up a whiteboard. So it looks a bit complex, this, and it was a nice opportunity for me to create a Venn diagram and be a bit geeky with Microsoft Whiteboard. But the first stage of this is to think about those questions that we had in there. And what I'd like to do, Lindsay's going to be sort of capturing ideas as we talk through these. And what we're going to do is, if we capture any ideas that you might have on improvements that will help team leaders, and then the second stage of this conversation, so we'll have about 6 to 7 minutes on each, but then we'll sort of map this to this diagram around building capability and capacity, empowering team leaders, and promoting continuous improvement. You can see I've added some on that we've done more recently. So we did our enhanced data dashboards last year. That was our key development in TED. And whilst that is really useful to us as practitioners, something I'm really conscious of is that over that period, team leaders, their experience of TED probably didn't change very much. So what we want to do this year is offer something that's going to make TED fresh for team leaders, that's going to give them a new reason to engage with TED, and is going to help those who do engage with it year on year keep going. More recently, we introduced our continuous improvements toolkits, which Lindsay worked a lot on. I think we shared back in December, maybe January. We've created some continuous improvement toolkits, which absolutely fit into all three of these categories of building capability and capacity, empowering team leaders, and promoting continuous improvement. So to kick us off, what ideas do we have? Have you had any thoughts as to things which would really help team leaders with TED? Feel free to come in and offer your suggestions. Oh, Lindsay, you got one. Would you like to come in?
Yes, it was one that I'd like to share, an idea that was kind of suggested by Megan and Sean during our monthly coffee catch-up last Friday. Okay. And we were discussing our toolkits and how can you guys find out which are the most relevant, which are the newest toolkits, rather than having to search through and think, have I seen that one before? Is there something else that I'm missing? So what the idea that Megan and Sean had come up with was for us to maybe add a drop-down filter menu for the toolkits to sort by date, just in a simple format from either from the newest to the oldest or the oldest to newest. And then obviously behind the scenes, it could hopefully work out from the published date. So it'd give you just a list from top to bottom. And then you could obviously just select that filter and you could see if there's anything new that has been put on there, rather than, going, oh, I don't know if I've seen that one. Have I worked with that one? Is there something new that I'm missing? So that's one development we're working on, which I'll put on the ideas board now.
Marvellous. Yeah, thanks for Lindsay. Yeah, well remembered. Yeah, on Friday. And I think this shows the value of those coffee catch-ups that we had. We had a great discussion around how could we highlight new tools so that team leaders who were coming back to TED knew which ones were perhaps different from when they previously engaged with it, or where there were fresh resources on different topics. So I really do like that idea of having some sort of way of highlighting new tools or filtering toolkits by date added, so that you can see which ones might be really current and really up to date in terms of being produced, and perhaps some of the research that sits behind it. So yeah, great idea. Thanks, Lindsay. Jeanette, would you like to come in next?
Yeah, I'd love to see the development of where the TED survey results are per department rather than just allocated to the person who set it up. On the basis of, because of staff turnover, that means actually a team can sometimes lose that momentum to be able to see their journey, because obviously the only person who can access it is the person who set it up. And if you've got 2 or 3 people in a team, they might take it in turns to keep that I suppose the skills up, but also recognizing staff turnover.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying there is the ability for more than one user to be allocated as the sort of person responsible for a TED. Is that right?
Not necessarily to be responsible for it, but so if there's, say, 3 of us in a team and we're each doing it, if I set a TED up, then only I can see it, and I can then download it and share it with everybody else. If I leave, the other 2 people who might be carrying on, they can't access it. So as a department, we can't see progression.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be a good development. I'm just thinking how it would work. Would it be, let's say, if I'm a team leader, if I could delegate access to it, so I could delegate maybe 2 or 3 other people who can see it.
Or even and then just in case somebody then leaves, otherwise the rest of the team lose that progression and being able to see the changes and that they've actually made.
Great point. Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, and it comes back to, I think Christine was saying before, around how you might have people other than the team leader who come on the training, and you might set them up with a TED account, but they still can't view their team's TED survey because it's allocated to someone else. So yeah, really like that. Thanks, Jeanette. Let's see, a couple more hands up. We've got Sharon. Would you like to go in next?
Hi. The thing that I think would be useful would be to have an inbuilt AI tool for analysing the free text responses. I know it's physically possible to copy and paste the comments and put them into an AI tool and to ask what the themes are. But as a trust, we're part of the Microsoft Copilot pilot. So we've been asked not to use anything in the short term. And I just think it would be, a really easy to kind of make analysing those free text comments easier, just to be able to find the themes at the click of a button, which essentially is what ChatGPT or Copilot could do, but without having to share that information when you don't know where the data's going.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that idea, and I think AI is it's sort of the flavour of the moment that everybody wants to use it. There might be a bit of fear around it. So any way that we can make it accessible to teams and that would really help them with a TED, I think that could be really useful. And I think you're right, particularly with the free text comments, and especially for bigger teams who might get reams and reams of comments, a way of being able to summarise and theme that up would really help. So yeah, love that idea. Thank you. Claire, would you like to go in next?
Yeah, I was wondering from a kind of a best practice point of view, what we tend to do when we're supporting managers with the report is we will show them how to export the full PDF copy for themselves. And generally what I tend to do is advise managers to use snipping tool to copy the main body of the report into a Word document, excluding the open text comments as they appear on the report. Because for me, there's something around psychological safety, even if there's nothing in there particularly contentious. Certainly if it's a small team, the last thing you want is people to go down the rabbit warren of trying to work out who said what and completely miss the point. I was just wondering if there's any way of exporting almost two different versions of the report, so a full manager's report, but then a report minus the comments, maybe with some kind of little arrows on it as well, kind of explaining the breakdown of the report. Because the way we have to do it at the moment is either get the manager to do the snipping tool, copy and paste into Word, or do it for them, and then kind of provide them with a template email kind of summarizing how to understand the report. Whereas actually, if we could export two different versions of the report, one for the manager, one for members of staff that excluded the open text comments, but also had some kind of, little explanation boxes to take them through how to interpret the results, that would be really helpful.
Excellent. Yeah, great idea. And yeah, I think initially it's just a bit of quality of life improvement, isn't it? It saves you having to do that snipping tool bit. But yeah, I think that could be really powerful if there was a way that team members could download a version and maybe a manager could select when they want to release the report. That version. And then I'm also thinking about, wouldn't it be great if we could combine that with Sharon's idea around in the free text comments. It also gives you a bit of an AI summary, so you get the free text, and at the top it says the sort of headlines of these comments are X, Y, and Z. These are main themes that are reoccurring, and maybe even your data could do that as well, to say these are your top performing questions, these are your lower ones. So yeah, I love that.
The only other thing as well that would be helpful, and I think I've asked this before and I'm not sure, I think the answer is that it's not possible at this moment in time, is have an additional, and this is kind of more to help us as practitioners, but I think longer term it could help end users as well, is having an additional drop down to delineate care unit, which care unit teams sit in. Because when we come to report on, say, average themes at a care unit level, we have to export the trust survey and then add a column in and identify which, and then add the filters, which can be quite, with all the TEDs we have at the moment, that can take some time. And obviously it's something you have to do each time to make sure. Whereas obviously if we had that drop down for the purpose of kind of care unit reporting, because our leadership structure is structured around our care units, it would be useful to be able to pull reports off at a care unit level.
Okay, so it would be an extra sort of layer of reporting in the middle. I'm thinking about as a database, it'd be an extra level. So yeah, I think good suggestion. I think you're right, it's something that has been suggested before. It is possible in the system that we can develop it in. I know when I put that to our developers, they'll talk about how big of a change that is, though. But thanks for putting it out there. We can with all these ideas, we'll float them with our developers and see what's practical, what's possible, what's going to be the most sort of time and cost effective. But yeah,
thanks,
great idea. So I'm conscious of time. I will just stick on this bit and I'll maybe review the other bit later. But Christine, did you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I was just following on Jeanette and Claire's suggestion. I was just having a bit of a reflection, thinking out loud. With the divisional leader level, when we set up, that is the level that I don't really use at the moment. I was just thinking, would it be useful for actually service leader that needs to oversee those teams as an overall trust result, would be useful to start really utilize that level? Because at the moment for me, or even my TED coaches sits at the team leader level, because they can only get the result from what I sent them. Now, I think that's quite challenging because we are not really using the divisional leader level because it doesn't fit into any needs of what we do. And just thinking about having separate report, keeping the momentum going, it might be useful to have some role for either TED coaches or divisional leader that actually see a bit more of the result, but also how do we ensure the confidentiality and that is another big picture behind it.
Absolutely.
So it might be again a separate report. I don't know, but just spotlight what team has been doing, and here are the results. When did they do this, and is it due for a review again? Those sort of highlighted details may be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great suggestion, Christine. And I think you're right. I think divisional leader is the level which is used least across all our organisations. So I suppose one thing to consider is, do we need a different type of role that is just something different to a divisional lead, or do we tweak the existing divisional lead? And I suppose if we did that, we'd need to have a conversation with those who are currently using it to see, you know, would it affect the way they use it. But I think you're absolutely right, that way of someone who can oversee an area in the right way, so, you know, mindful of psychological safety and things, but could still run reports that help them with their decision making and promoting TED and encouraging teams to keep the momentum as well. But yeah, great suggestion. Fab. Okay, yeah, as I say, we're quite short on time, so I won't go on to the next section, but I think you've given us some good ideas there. And as with all of these things, we can't promise any of these things, but what we can do is take them to our developer and put them on the table for what might be in 2025's developments. And I think all the things you've suggested there would really help team leaders and help keep that momentum. So it would really sort of help us with it. Just to give you an insight into some of the things that Sam and I have talked about is things like automations. So maybe 6 months after you've done your TED, you get an automated email that suggests, are you ready for another TED? Or maybe you could set that threshold as to when they come. And another thing might be around maybe an interactive action plan that sits in TED. And again, we want to do that in a way which feels as though everyone can use it and that, you know, works in the way it's intended. But yeah, thank you for sharing. I'm going to very quickly go back to my slides before we wrap up. But love all those suggestions. We'll collate those and put them to our developers. Just put on the sort of feedback survey. So I think, Lindsay, I realise you type it away on our whiteboard, but if you get a chance, we can pop the link in the chat for feedback on today's session. Hopefully you found it useful. In terms of the next steps, we'll be collating the outputs from today's session, so all the things you put in the chat and on our whiteboard there, and I'll share this back with you. I'm very conscious we haven't sent the video from the last lunch and learn. That's partly for me, I've moved house recently, so I'm just getting back up to speed with everything. So I will be sending that out along with the video from today, hopefully very soon over the next week. But for yourself, just consider your own approach to TED Team Leader training, if there's anything from the enhanced program which you might want to add in there. And keep sharing what you're doing, because it really does help us right across the collaborative. To signpost you to our next events, we've got our next coffee catch up on the 7th of April, and we have a lunch and learn which is going to focus around team resilience on the 22nd of April. And then our next deep dive will be in June, where we'll look more at mid-year planning and looking at TED with the people promise, if that's sort of the factor, the main factor that we want to focus on at that time of year. Okay, so it's been lovely to see you all. Thank you all for contributing as well. It's been a great conversation again, and we hope you all have a lovely week, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.